Good evening and welcome back. Tonight, we begin a long, slow drift across the immense tapestry of human beginnings and the story of ancient civilizations' mega compilation. We will trace the quiet rise of cities from the ancient dust of river valleys and the serene, timeless patterns they laid down for all that followed. I invite you to share where you're listening from. Let the atmosphere of your own quiet room tone settle softly around us. Settle in now. Find warmth and soften your breath. Allow your mind to drift back, releasing the gravity of time and the stress of the modern world. Remember, there is nothing to solve, nothing to resist. All plans and anxieties can dissolve into the deep, quiet night. Let my voice be your soft anchor tonight, guiding you into a deep, restful calm. We are drifting back through time towards the fertile banks of the Nile, the Tigris, and the Indus, under the deep expanse of the quiet night. Nothing in tonight's story will disturb your peace. Let the gentle greeting settle over you. Now allow yourself a long, slow breath in and out, releasing any lingering tightness. Imagine the air around you is turning soft like mist, post-moonlight, settling over the sleeping ruins of a ziggurat. We are entering an ancient myth-like cadence, where the vastness of history has been filtered and softened into serene visuals. Time moves slowly here, measured only by the steady, slow tides of geological time and cultural formation. Our journey will follow the faint, winding paths of human gentle footsteps from the very beginning, ensuring no tension interrupts your drift. If these gentle journeys help you rest, you may leave a soft like or subscribe, only if it feels comforting and natural for your night. Chapter 1. Origins. The River. Valleys and the Gift of Silt. We begin our long narrative at the ultimate origin and the geographical necessity that determined where civilization would first take root. This is the ancient background tracing the quiet confluence of waterland and human ingenuity around 4000 BCE. The origin of complex human society is intimately tied to the ancient rivers. The four main cradles, Mesopotamia, Tigris, and Euphrates, Egypt, the Nile, the Indus Valley, and the Yellow River Huanghe in China, shared a crucial predictable blessing, the annual flood. Imagine the land under the deep, quiet night, waiting patiently. The rivers, with their slow tides and steady flow, carried rich, nourishing silt from distant mountains. When they periodically overflowed their banks, they deposited this dark, fertile sediment onto the surrounding plains. This gift of silt was the fundamental legacy of the rivers, transforming dry, difficult land into incredibly productive agricultural soil. This agricultural abundance was the first great softening filter for human stress. Where hunting and gathering required constant, unpredictable energy, the river valleys offered a reliable, predictable surplus of food. This surplus freed a portion of the population from the daily grind of survival, allowing them to engage in other specialized tasks. This quiet freedom was the true origin of urbanization and complexity. The first essential tool developed in these river valleys was not a weapon, but the irrigation canal. The waters were predictable, but they required management. Communities realized that to harness the full power of the flood, they needed to cooperate on a scale larger than a single family. They began digging canals, thin, deliberate lines in the ancient dust, to draw the water further inland and to drain excess water. This necessity of managing the water system and the maintenance of the dikes and canals was the fundamental formation of centralized society. It required planning coordination and a single predictable authority to allocate labor and resolve local disputes. The quiet rhythm of the river therefore dictated the rhythm of governance itself. The earliest celestial observations were born here too. The precise predictability of the river cycles led to the creation of the first calendars. In Egypt, the heliacal rising of Sirius, the dog star, marked the start of the Nile flood, intertwining the distant night with the agricultural survival of the land. The ancient roots of civilization are found in this immense patient process of hydroengineering. The first settlements were built of humble mud brick, rising slowly from the floodplains, anchored to the dependable generosity of the water. The warm breath of stability was drawn from the slow river. Chapter 3. Early Journeys. Egypt and the Pharaonic Order. The organizational formation achieved in Mesopotamia based on writing and standardized law flowed southward, finding a distinct and profound expression in ancient Egypt. This phase of early journeys was defined by the unparalleled centralization of power and the supreme cultural focus on eternity. Unlike the politically fractured city-states of Mesopotamia, Egypt was unified early and endured for 3 millennia under the centralized authority of the pharaoh. The origin of this centralization was the serene, predictable behavior of the Nile. The river's annual flood, the inundation, was so regular that it fostered a belief in absolute order and stability, ma'at. The river was a softening filter against the chaos that afflicted other regions. The legacy of the Nile dictated that the pharaoh, the living embodiment of the god Horus, was not merely a king, but the divine guarantor of Ma'at. His role was to ensure the cosmic and terrestrial rhythm remained unbroken. This immense stress of responsibility was managed by an unparalleled, sophisticated bureaucracy of scribes and officials who oversaw the massive public works. The early journeys of the Egyptian state were focused inward on perfecting the system of organization and securing the pharaoh's passage into the afterlife. This led to the greatest architectural formation of the ancient world, the pyramids. Imagine the quiet stone of the Great Pyramid of Giza rising steadily from the ancient dust. These structures were not built quickly or under conditions of sharp suffering. They were the product of decades of methodical, organized labor, fueled by the predictable surplus of the Nile's harvest. The pyramids represented the ultimate belief in permanence and the predictable return of the divine king, securing the continuous life of the nation. The scribes, the silent, gentle footsteps of the administration, were the true backbone of the state. They recorded the immense flow of grain-calculated taxes and managed the vast labor force using hieroglyphs, a script that was simultaneously administrative and profoundly sacred. The beauty and complexity of the script reinforced the divine nature of the state's order. This immense centralization gave rise to a deep cultural legacy, the profound focus on eternity. From the elaborate rituals performed in the halls of the temples to the careful mummification processes, every action was calibrated for the long, quiet journey of the soul, Ka and Ba, into the afterlife. The warm breath of Egyptian power flowed not from extensive external conquests, though they did occur, but from the absolute internal stability derived from the slow river and the unchallenged authority of the divine pharaoh. Chapter 4. Early Journeys. The Indus Valley and the Mystery of Peace. Following the immense centralized formation of Egypt, we now turn to a unique and deeply tranquil phase of early journeys, the story of the Indus Valley Civilization, or Harappan, which flourished peacefully from roughly 2600 to 1900 BCE, along the slow-moving Indus River and its tributaries. This was a distinct formation of civilization because of its astonishing pervasive sense of quietude and order. Unlike the neighboring kingdoms built around visible displays of royal or divine power, the Indus cities suggest a society governed by consensus and a profound focus on collective well-being. Imagine the great cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro viewed under the soft light of the distant night. They were meticulously planned, a serene visual of urban discipline. Their streets were laid out in a perfect rigid grid pattern, and the main avenues cutting each other at precise right angles. The housing built from uniform-baked mud brick shows a remarkable lack of distinction between the homes of the elite and the general populace. The most profound legacy of their architecture was their mastery of public works and hygiene. Almost every home was equipped with a bathing area and a toilet connected to a sophisticated underground drainage system that ran beneath the quiet stone of the streets. This immense, organized effort to maintain public sanitation was a softening filter against the stress of communal urban life, revealing a civilization where power was expressed not through colossal monuments, but through efficient, quiet service to the citizen. The puzzle of the Indus Valley lies in its profound stillness, the notable absence of the traditional signs of concentrated power that defined the ancient world. No colossal palaces. There is no evidence of a single immense palace or royal compound that would suggest a dominant king or pharaoh. No monumental temples. The cities lack the massive centralized temples or ziggurats seen in Mesopotamia, suggesting their spiritual focus was domestic or decentralized. Lack of weapons. Archaeological evidence for weapons and organized warfare is minimal, painting a picture of a civilization that prioritized commerce and stability over military might. The governance of the Indus Valley appears to have been an administrative, calm reinterpretation of political power, a system perhaps managed by merchants, priests, or a civic council dedicated entirely to maintaining predictable order and the flow of trade. The origin of their stability came from their expansive, peaceful trade networks. The gentle footsteps of Indus merchants carried goods, cotton, textiles, and jewelry far beyond the river valley. The discovery of Indus seals, small square carved stones bearing images and an undeciphered script in distant Mesopotamian ruins is the quiet stone testament to this extensive, secure commerce. The standardized weights and measures used throughout their cities further confirm a high degree of economic organization. The ultimate end of the Harappan civilization around 1900 BCE remains one of history's great mysteries. Their decline was not a sudden tragedy or conflict, but a softened historical shift, a slow tides of dissolution. Theories suggest the slow river systems dried up, shifting their course and severely damaging the agricultural base. Climate change and environmental stress led to the quiet abandonment of the great urban centers, with the population gradually migrating eastward and southward. The civilization did not collapse. It slowly dissolved into ancient dust, leaving a legacy of urban planning and a haunting sense of profound organizational peace that continues to influence the cultural memory of the subcontinent. Chapter 5. Early Journeys. The quiet legacy of cuneiform and law. The profound formation of the Mesopotamian city-states, rooted in the challenging rhythm of their ancient rivers, soon led to a crucial phase of early journeys defined by the codification and widespread influence of their administrative and legal systems. This quiet flow of ideas became a lasting legacy. The cuneiform script, which was born out of the simple necessity of accounting in the temples, began its evolution from mere receipts into a sophisticated tool for recording history, literature, and most importantly, law. This meticulous process of transforming abstract, wedge-shaped marks into comprehensive legal frameworks was a massive softening filter against the chaos of human conflict, replacing private violence with public, predictable justice. The most famous expression of this organized thought was the Code of Hammurabi C. on 1754 BCE, established during the Babylonian dominance of Mesopotamia. Imagine this law code not as a declaration of fear, but as a vast standardized document, a quiet stone anchor of social stability. The code was publicly inscribed on massive stelae, ensuring that the rules governing contracts, property, and family relations were visible and predictable across the unified Babylonian state. The purpose of the code was to establish Ma'at, or rather its Mesopotamian equivalent, a reliable, predictable social order enforced by the king. This comprehensive system of law was a profound legacy, proving that centralized human reason could systematically organize the complexities of urban life, providing solace and security to merchants, farmers, and citizens alike. The early journeys of Mesopotamian influence also flowed through the trade networks that connected the Tigris-Euphrates Valley to the surrounding regions. The gentle footsteps of Assyrian and Babylonian merchants carried not only textiles and oil, but also the principles of their economic administration, standardized weights, measures, and crucially, the system of credit and interest. These practices, recorded meticulously on small clay tablets, became the warm breath of international commerce across the Near East. The continuous exchange of goods and ideas meant that the cuneiform script and the Akkadian language became the lingua franca of diplomacy. Kings of distant lands, including the Egyptian pharaohs, as seen in the Amarna letters, corresponded using this Mesopotamian script, acknowledging its enduring legacy as the universal language of power and international relations. This administrative and legal flow solidified the reputation of Mesopotamia as the world's first great political and legal laboratory. The distant echoes of Hammurabi's legal principles would later influence the legal traditions of the Levant and eventually form a distant ancient root for later codes of justice. The quiet persistence of the scribes ensured that the formation of the world's first cities was inextricably linked to the formation of its first universal laws. Chapter 6. Early Journeys. The Bronze Age. Global Thread. The organizational legacy established in the river valleys provided the foundation for the next profound phase of early journeys, the intense quiet globalization of the Late Bronze Age, 1600s, 1200 BCE. This was a period where disparate civilizations linked themselves together with a golden thread of diplomacy and trade. Imagine the Eastern Mediterranean world as a single vast interconnected room. The major powers, the New Kingdom of Egypt, the Hittite Empire in Anatolia, the Mycenaean kingdoms in Greece, and the empires of Babylonia and Assyria, maintained a continuous, predictable relationship. This was a softening filter against sharp political conflict, as their survival relied on mutual cooperation. The core of this connectivity was the trade in bronze, the metal that defined the age. Bronze required copper primarily from Cyprus and tin from distant, often hard-to-reach sources. The necessity of securing this slow tides of metal created a system of state-level exchange and diplomacy. The early journeys were dominated by the movement of diplomatic envoys and trade ships. Messengers moving with gentle footsteps across vast distances carried cuneiform tablets written in the common language of Akkadian. These tablets, preserved in archives like the Amarna letters, reveal a world of serene formal address between brother kings, arranging royal marriages, discussing trade agreements, and managing the movement of valuable goods. This patient, unhurried dialogue ensured the maintenance of the balance of power. The legacy of this trade was the creation of a vast, shared cosmopolitan material culture. Coastal city-states like Ugarit became silent, bustling hubs where goods from every corner of this world met Egyptian gold and linen, Mycenaean olive oil and pottery, Hittite silver and iron, and Babylonian cylinder seals. The discovery of shipwrecks such as the Uluburun wreck provides a powerful, serene visual of this globalization. Its cargo, a quiet, immense collection of goods from at least 8 different cultures, demonstrates that the high-status stress of maintaining luxury and military readiness required seamless international cooperation. This immense interconnected economic dependency provided profound solace and wealth, but it also contained an immense hidden fragility. The security of all these great civilizations depended on the uninterrupted flow of that single thin thread of a tin. Any disruption in the supply chain or any internal stress in one palace could send distant echoes of instability throughout the entire system. This era was the pinnacle of ancient globalization, a time when the warm breath of commerce flowed freely across the sea and the land, creating a single, shared, opulent culture. The quiet night settled over a world that had mastered its material needs through profound organization and global diplomacy. Chapter 7. Turning Points. The fragility of the global thread. The highly integrated global system of the Late Bronze Age reached its crucial turning points during the 13th and 12th centuries BCE, a period marked by the slow, systematic softening filter of systemic failure. This was not a single sharp catastrophe, but the simultaneous fraying of the many threads that held the vast structure together. The origin of the collapse lay in the very dependency that had once fostered such great wealth. The centralized palace economies relied absolutely on two pillars: the predictable tin supply for bronze and the predictable agricultural surplus for provisioning their specialized populations. The first profound shift was environmental. We view this not as a natural disaster, but as a misty recollection of sustained regional droughts and subtle climatic shifts. These changes reduced the agricultural yields across Anatolia, the Levant, and Greece. The Egyptian archives show a pattern of repeated grain requests from the Hittite Empire, revealing the underlying stress on the food supply. When the predictable flow of grain, the warm breath of sustenance faltered, the kings lost their primary means of rewarding loyalty and feeding their vast administrative and artisan class. Simultaneously, the supply of tin sourced from distant regions became intermittent and unreliable. This economic interruption was a massive, silent blow. Without tin, the palaces could not produce bronze, which meant they could not equip their armies' repair farming tools or create the ritual objects that reinforced their spiritual authority. The combination of food and resource scarcity led to a breakdown of the internal social contract. The immense hierarchy of the palaces became unsustainable. Specialized artisans and laborers, no longer provisioned by the central authority, were forced into self-reliance, leading to the dissolution of specialized knowledge and the cessation of administrative writing like Mycenaean Linear B. This dispersal of the populace from the urban centers was a quiet, profound evolution. The systemic fracture was complete when the peripheral stress resulted in a quiet, massive demographic shift. The sudden appearance of displaced populations, known in Egyptian records as the Sea Peoples, became the final visible sign of the collapse. We interpret this not as a unified invasion, but as a vast, gentle metaphor for groups of people driven from their homes by famine and economic failure, seeking new lands and stable resources along the coasts. The legacy of this period was the slow final end of the centralized high-culture Bronze Age civilization. The vast, interconnected world, which had achieved such stability through mutual trade, proved inherently fragile when its essential threads began to break simultaneously. The quiet stone of the palaces was abandoned, and the ancient dust settled over the ruins of a globalized system that had become too brittle to survive scarcity. Chapter 8. Early Journeys. The Age of Iron and the Alphabet. The quiet dissolution of the Bronze Age palaces, caused by the stress of scarcity and the loss of the central tin supply, led to a profound structural reorganization. This new phase of early journeys was defined by a quiet, unhurried technological and cultural evolution, the shift to iron, and the adoption of the alphabet. The core legacy of the collapse was the necessity of decentralization. Iron ore was far more abundant and widely available than tin, making it suitable for local production. This massive, slow technological transition to the Iron Age was a powerful softening filter on the old economic model. Communities freed from the dependency on centralized palace control for their raw materials became more self-sufficient and resilient. The quiet stone of the local ore replaced the necessity of long-distance bronze trade. Simultaneously, the collapse of the complex bureaucratic systems of the palaces meant that the intricate specialized administrative scripts like Mycenaean Linear B and Akkadian cuneiform were largely forgotten. They were simply too difficult and too specialized for the smaller, self-sufficient communities focused on local survival. The formation of a new communication system arose from the maritime traders of the Levant, the Phoenicians. These resilient coastal communities, emerging from the shadows of the collapse, needed a simple, efficient script for their expanding decentralized commerce. They perfected the alphabet, a phonetic system that used signs to represent sounds, not entire syllables or concepts. This alphabet was the greatest intellectual legacy of the collapse. Its simplicity was a profound, gentle metaphor for accessibility. literacy was no longer the exclusive, highly trained skill of palace scribes. It became a tool that could be mastered quickly by merchant sailors and ordinary citizens. The warm breath of knowledge could now flow freely, unconstrained by bureaucratic complexity. The early journeys of the Phoenicians carried on the soft wind of their trading ships, spread this alphabet across the Mediterranean. It was adopted and refined by the Greeks, who added vowels, and later by the Etruscans and Romans. This single invention was a decisive evolution that ensured the continuous flow of information and laid the fundamental foundation for classical thought and subsequent Western writing systems. The new decentralized world that emerged, defined by the local abundance of iron and the ease of communication provided by the alphabet, was fundamentally more resilient than the old. The gentle footsteps of these new political entities, the Greek polis and the Phoenician city-states, were now guided by greater individual access to both technology and knowledge. The distant echoes of the Bronze Age's rigid hierarchy had vanished, replaced by the seeds of political experimentation and widespread literacy. Chapter 9. Early Journeys. The Hellenic Renaissance and the Polis. The quiet evolution sparked by iron and the alphabet eventually led the fragmented Greek world into a new vibrant phase of early journeys, known as the Hellenic Renaissance, c. 800–500 BCE. This period was defined by the profound formation of the polis, or city-state, and the resurgence of organized trade across the Mediterranean. The core legacy of the Bronze Age collapse was the necessity of decentralization. The polis emerged as a resilient, localized political structure, a rejection of the massive brittle palace hierarchies of the past. The polis was not merely a city. It was a community of citizens, polity, and a philosophical and political ideal centered on public discussion and shared responsibility. Imagine the atmosphere in the early polis, like Athens or Corinth. The use of the simplified alphabet was crucial here. It was a softening filter on political discourse, allowing a wider range of citizens, including merchants and artisans, to become literate and engage with legal and political texts. This accessibility was the warm breath that fostered the growth of civic participation and, eventually, democracy. The early journeys of the Greeks in this era were characterized by massive colonization. This was not an aggressive imperial campaign, but a methodical, gentle metaphor for population expansion and the search for reliable resources, particularly grain and timber. Individual polis sponsored expeditions, sending citizens to found new independent cities, apoikiai, across the Black Sea, southern Italy, Magna Graecia, and North Africa. This colonization created a decentralized, resilient trade network. The new colonies supplied raw materials, while the mother cities supplied manufactured goods, particularly sophisticated pottery, and finished metalwork, now made increasingly of iron. This continuous, predictable, slow tides of commerce replaced the chaotic, uncertain exchanges of the Dark Age. The political structure within the polis underwent a quiet, continuous evolution. The rigid rule of the old aristocracies, the land-owning nobility, was challenged by the newly wealthy merchant class who had gained power and influence through maritime trade. This softened historical shift led to periods of tyranny, where popular leaders seized power to enact reforms that favored commerce and the common citizenry, eventually setting the stage for democracy in Athens. The legacy of the Hellenic Renaissance was the formation of the classical world's fundamental building block. The polis, small and fiercely independent, proved far more adaptable and resilient than the centralized empires of the past. The gentle footsteps of the colonists and the widespread use of the alphabet ensured that the Greek cultural and political model would eventually spread across the entire Mediterranean, laying the quiet, stable groundwork for the next 1,000 years of history. Chapter 10. Turning Points. The Persian Threat and Greek Identity. The decentralized yet flourishing world of the Greek polis soon reached a major external turning point. The pressure exerted by the immense centralized power of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, c. 550–550 479 BC. This encounter was a profound, quiet test of the resilience and adaptability of the polis system. The origin of this turning point lay in the westward expansion of the Persian Empire. This vast, organized political entity, having absorbed the ancient kingdoms of Mesopotamia and Egypt, extended its authority over the Greek city-states located on the western coast of Anatolia, Ionia. The Ionian Greeks, valuing their political formation based on self-governance, engaged in a resistance movement known as the Ionian Revolt. We view this resistance not as sharp violence, but as a distant echo of a profound political disagreement, a clash between the Greek ideal of small-scale decentralized freedom and the Persian ideal of vast centralized imperial order. The Persian response was predictable, a methodical, deliberate effort to impose order and administration on the rebellious city-states. The subsequent Persian Wars EC 490-479 BCE were the crucial softening filter for internal Greek divisions. The immense logistical power of the Persian army, moving with the immense slow tides of a unified empire, compelled the frequently feuding mainland Greek polis, most notably Athens and Sparta, into an unprecedented, if uneasy, alliance. This necessity of cooperation was a profound evolution of Greek political identity, where the shared concept of Hellenism temporarily superseded local political conflict. The major engagements of the war were fought not just for land, but for the fundamental principle of political structure. The Greek victories achieved through superior naval strategy and the disciplined hoplite infantry confirmed the quiet strength of the polis system. The resilience was rooted in the citizen soldier who fought not for a distant emperor, but for the direct self-governance of his own community. The legacy of the Persian Wars was the immense collective confidence it instilled in the Greek formation. The victory validated the decentralized political system and ushered in the classical age c. 479-323 BCE. This period was marked by the unparalleled flourishing of culture philosophy and democratic experimentation centered on Athens. The warm breath of cultural triumph solidified the Greek worldview, ensuring that their intellectual and political legacy would endure long after the military conflict had faded. The ancient dust of the Persian campaigns settled, leaving behind a profound question. Could the victorious Greeks maintain internal order now that the external stress had been relieved? The focus would now turn inward, leading to the next intense turning point in the rivalry between the great victors. Chapter 11. Turning Points. The Athenian hegemony and the Peloponnesian fraying. The magnificent victory over Persia was quickly followed by the next profound turning point, a phase of internal stress and eventual dissolution within the Greek world, driven by the emergence of Athenian hegemony. This was a softened historical shift that demonstrated the inherent fragility of the decentralized polis system when confronted with immense centralized wealth. Athens, having led the naval victory and possessing the immense resources of its silver mines, slowly transformed the Delian League, originally formed to defend against Persia, into a centralized naval empire. We view this not as a sharp takeover, but as a gentle metaphor for economic and political consolidation. The allied cities were required to pay tribute, silver, and ships to Athens, ensuring a vast, predictable, slow tides of wealth flowed directly into the city's treasury. This wealth funded the Athenian Golden Age. The city embarked on massive building projects, most famously the Parthenon. These projects were visible, serene visuals of civic pride and philosophical formation, showcasing the city's commitment to democracy and art. The warm breath of creativity was immense, giving rise to philosophy, Socrates, and the great tragic theater. However, this ascendancy caused immense tension with Sparta, the traditional military anchor of the Peloponnese, who led a rival land-based alliance. Sparta viewed Athens' naval empire, its democratic evolution, and its use of allied funds as a fundamental betrayal of the principle of decentralized Greek freedom. The subsequent Peloponnesian War, 431-414 BCE, was the defining yet filtered turning point of the classical age. We narrate this conflict as a long, drawn-out, distant echo of political tragedy, a failure of diplomacy and political understanding between two incompatible polis. The war was a strategic deadlock. Athens was unassailable by land due to its long walls, and Sparta was unassailable by sea. The conflict drained the resources and the political will of the entire Hellenic world. The massive legacy of the war was the irreparable weakening of the polis system as the primary source of Greek stability. The war consumed the citizen body and the treasury, ensuring that the Greek states were too exhausted to resist external pressure. The Spartan victory achieved with financial aid from the Persians was a quiet political conflict that dissolved the Athenian Empire. The low embers of self-governance were scattered, confirming that the fragmented, decentralized nature of the polis was ultimately vulnerable to sustained internal stress. The age of absolute polis sovereignty was nearing its end, making way for the next immense power to emerge from the periphery. Chapter 12. Early Journeys. The rise of Macedon and the Hellenic frontier. The immense internal stress and financial exhaustion caused by the Peloponnesian War left the Greek polis unable to sustain their political sovereignty. This vulnerability led to the next phase of early journeys, which saw the rise of a new power on the northern frontier, the Kingdom of Macedon. This marked a softened historical shift from the decentralized city-state to the unified territorial monarchy. Macedon, traditionally viewed by the southern Greeks as a peripheral, less civilized kingdom, was geographically blessed with immense natural resources, particularly timber, essential for shipbuilding, and gold, necessary for financing long campaigns. This quiet economic advantage was the origin of its political ascent. The most transformative figure of this ascent was Philip II, reigned 359–336 BCE. Philip's primary legacy was his methodical formation of the Macedonian state and military. He did not achieve dominance through sharp, sudden invasions, but through the patient strategic application of diplomacy, financial maneuvering, and superior organization. Philip's core innovation was the Macedonian phalanx, a highly disciplined infantry formation armed with a sarissa, an exceptionally long pike. This formation, moving with immense slow tactical power, was a quiet technical evolution that overwhelmed the traditional shorter-speared hoplite formations of the southern polis. Philip's political strategy was a masterpiece of quiet transitions. He used Macedonian gold sourced from his abundant mines to bribe finance or form alliances with the perpetually feuding Greek city-states. He offered stability and wealth, capitalizing on the exhaustion left by the previous wars. He presented himself not as a conqueror, but as the hegemon leader capable of unifying the Greeks for a common external purpose: the long-anticipated invasion of the weakened Persian Empire. The final early journey of Greek independence concluded at the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BCE. We narrate this event as a distant echo of strategic finality. Philip's unified Macedonian army, leveraging its superior organization, overcame the combined forces of Athens and Thebes. This was not the destruction of the polis, but its quiet formal submission to a single external political authority. Philip did not dismantle the polis. He respected their legal structures and cultural autonomy, but their foreign policy and military independence were permanently absorbed under Macedonian control. He organized the Greek states into the League of Corinth, ensuring that Greek military power was now centrally directed. The legacy of Philip II was the irreversible end of the age of the fully sovereign independent polis. The inherent fragility of the decentralized system exposed during the Peloponnesian War had finally yielded to the superior resources and stability of the centralized monarchy. The warm breath of self-governance was now shared by the soft wind of Macedonian imperial will. Chapter 13. Early Journeys, Alexander and the Hellenic Flood. The methodical consolidation achieved by Philip II set the stage for the most spectacular of all early journeys in the ancient world. The immense campaign of Alexander the Great reigned 336–323 BCE. This journey was the single force that irrevocably shattered the decentralized geopolitical reality and created a vast, unified Hellenic world that stretched from Greece to India. Alexander's journey began as the long-planned campaign against the Persian Empire, the ancient foe of the Greeks. We view this colossal movement not as a sustained military struggle, but as a rapid, unhurried flow of cultural and political energy across vast geographical expanses. The Macedonian phalanx, the organized army inherited from his father, moved with an efficiency that quickly dissolved the massive decentralized structure of the Persian domain. The true legacy of Alexander's journey was not the destruction of kingdoms, but the founding of new cities and the profound softening filter of cultural exchange. Alexander founded dozens of cities across the East, naming many of them Alexandria. These cities were designed as centers for Greek culture, language, and trade, establishing a common economic and intellectual framework that spanned 3 continents. Imagine the gentle footsteps of the Greek administrators, scholars, merchants, and artists who followed the army. They settled in these new urban centers, establishing polis, city-states, with familiar institutions, gymnasia, theaters, and libraries in lands that had traditionally been governed by entirely different structures. This was a profound, calm reinterpretation of civilization, where Greek ideas blended and synthesized with the ancient cultures of Egypt, Persia, and India. In Egypt, Alexander was welcomed as a liberator from the Persians and was swiftly recognized as a new pharaoh, demonstrating the enduring power of the Egyptian political formation. He founded the most important of his new cities, Alexandria, which quickly became the greatest center of Hellenistic trade and scholarship. This was a profound turning point for global intellectual life. The entire Hellenistic world, created by Alexander's single relentless journey, became a vast, interconnected sphere. Trade flowed more smoothly than it had since the Bronze Age, as a single cultural language, Koine Greek, and a stable currency facilitated easy commerce across the former Persian territories. The warm breath of Greek philosophy, mathematics, and science now flowed eastward, while the knowledge and wisdom of the East flowed westward, creating a vibrant, unified, intellectual environment. Alexander's sudden death in Babylon, which we view as a distant echo of political tragedy, left an immense power vacuum. However, the immense legacy of his journey held firm. The empire fractured not into its original disparate kingdoms, but into a series of large, powerful Hellenistic successor kingdoms, the Diadochi, such as the Ptolemies in Egypt, the Seleucids in Persia, and the Antigonids in Macedon. These successor kingdoms, despite their localized political conflict, all maintained the Greek political and cultural framework, ensuring that the vast cultural fusion achieved by Alexander's journey continued for centuries. The low embers of Greek civilization had been spread far and wide, ensuring its endurance as a global force. Chapter 14, Formation. The Hellenistic synthesis in Alexandria. The immense power of Alexander's early journey led to a new concentrated phase of formation known as the Hellenistic synthesis, EC. 323–30 BCE. This period was characterized by the deliberate blending of Greek reason and organization with the deep ancient wisdom and resources of the Near East, creating a unified cosmopolitan culture. The heart of this formation was the city of Alexandria in Egypt, founded by Alexander and made the capital of the Ptolemaic kingdom. Imagine this city built on the coast facing the sea, a profound, serene visual of its function as the nexus between the Mediterranean and the ancient Nile. It was designed on a grid plan, showcasing Greek rationality, but it drew its immense wealth and sustenance from the structured agricultural legacy of Egypt. The Ptolemies, who governed Egypt, realized that their stability depended on embracing the ancient legacy of the pharaohs, While they ruled as Greek monarchs, they adopted the pharaonic ideal and rituals for their Egyptian subjects, ensuring a continuous quiet flow of loyalty and taxes. This careful duality was the softening filter for foreign rule. The most magnificent legacy of this synthesis was the creation of the Library of Alexandria and the accompanying museum. This was not merely a storage building. It was the world's first true research institution dedicated to the systematic collection, translation, and study of all known knowledge. Scholars, Greek, Egyptian, Babylonian, and Jewish, worked quietly together within its echoing halls, preserving and synthesizing texts. This intellectual hub propelled immense quiet early journeys in science and mathematics. Euclid codified geometry, building upon the ancient Egyptian and Babylonian land surveys, creating a logical framework that would endure for millennia. Archimedes made foundational discoveries in physics and engineering, combining Greek mathematics with practical application. Eratosthenes famously calculated the circumference of the Earth with startling accuracy, demonstrating the power of combined knowledge and systematic observation. The formation of the Hellenistic synthesis proved that the greatest intellectual progress is often achieved in moments of cultural mixing. The warm breath of Greek philosophy and science was enriched by the profound, long-term astronomical data of Babylon and the structural stability of the Egyptian state. However, the immense wealth and strategic location of Alexandria eventually drew the attention of a rising power in the West. The gentle footsteps of the scholars and the vast flow of commerce were slowly leading the Hellenistic world into the inevitable turning point of confrontation with Rome. The cultural brilliance of the East was about to be absorbed by the pragmatic, methodical power of the West. Chapter 15. Turning Points. The Roman absorption and the legal legacy. The immense cultural and economic sphere of the Hellenistic synthesis slowly approached its final, inevitable turning point: the methodical absorption by the rising pragmatic power of Rome. This was the slow, quiet imposition of a new political master over the ancient lands of the Mediterranean, a process that transformed the Greek cultural legacy into a new legal and political structure. Rome's expansion eastward was not a single sharp invasion, but a strategic and legalistic process. They first intervened in the affairs of the Hellenistic kingdoms as liberators, or allies, subtly weakening them through treaties, financial demands, and carefully applied diplomatic pressure. This initial phase was a softening filter, allowing Rome to integrate the region without massive continuous military expenditure. The core reason for the turning point was the immense stability and wealth of the East. Rome recognized the value of inheriting the established functioning systems of the Ptolemies and Seleucids. They did not destroy the great Hellenistic cities like Alexandria and Antioch. Rather, they used them as vital administrative and trade hubs for their own burgeoning republic and later their empire. The final softened historical shift occurred gradually over 2 centuries, culminating with the direct annexation of the last major Hellenistic state, Egypt, following the defeat of Cleopatra VII in 30 BCE. This event, which we view as a distant echo of political tragedy, marked the end of the line of Macedonian kings who had ruled the eastern Mediterranean since Alexander the Great. The profound legacy of this absorption was that the Greek intellectual framework was preserved and integrated with Roman political genius. The warm breath of Greek philosophy and science continued to flow, but now under the secure, quiet stone of Roman law and administration. The Romans excelled in organization and law. They provided the uniform legal framework, predictable taxation, and unparalleled infrastructure, roads and harbors that allowed the vast Hellenistic trade networks to flourish even more smoothly. The Greek language koine remained the lingua franca of commerce, learning, and the church in the Eastern Roman Empire, ensuring that the intellectual achievements of the classical and Hellenistic worlds were not lost. The legacy of this phase was the creation of a vast, unified Greco-Roman world. The political energy of the ancient civilizations, the formation of the Mesopotamian law, the Egyptian structure, and the Greek philosophy was all quietly gathered under the single umbrella of the Roman state, preserving the ancient roots for the centuries that followed. Chapter 16, Turning Points. The Roman Peace and the Imperial Cement. The absorption of the wealthy Hellenistic successor kingdoms by Rome marked a fundamental turning point. A vast, softened historical shift from a world of competing cultural spheres to a single unified political and economic entity. This new phase was defined by the long, deep stability provided by the Pax Romana Roman peace 27 BCE, 180 CE. The legacy of Rome was not its philosophy, but its capacity for organization and law. Rome provided the final necessary structure, the imperial cement, that bound the diverse ancient civilizations into a cohesive whole. The vast military machine, moving with disciplined, gentle footsteps, secured the immense frontiers, eliminating major internal political conflict and allowing the warm breath of commerce to flow freely across the entire Mediterranean. Now Roman's Mare Nostrum, our sea. This turning point created a unique cultural synthesis, the Greco-Roman world. The Romans recognized and revered the intellectual legacy of the conquered cultures. They adopted Greek language koine as the language of scholarship and culture in the East, while Latin served as the language of law and administration in the West. This duality was a profound softening filter, allowing the scientific and philosophical achievements of Alexandria and Athens to be preserved and disseminated across the empire. The most enduring legacy of this Roman administrative formation was the creation of a unified legal framework. Roman law, characterized by its systematic, predictable application, provided the ultimate solace and security for trade property rights and citizenship across vast distances. This legal standardization ensured that the slow tides of prosperity reached even the most distant provinces. The immense stress and suffering of the preceding centuries of competition and warfare were replaced by an unprecedented era of infrastructural development and urbanization. Roman engineers overlaid the ancient Lydian and Hellenistic trade routes with a massive network of paved roads and aqueducts, ensuring the swift, predictable movement of goods, information, and legions. The political simplicity of the empire, the rule of the princeps first citizen, replaced the chaotic, often fatal political conflict of the Greek polis and the Roman Republic. This single stable authority provided the deep, predictable rhythm that the ancient civilizations, exhausted by centuries of fragmentation and war, fundamentally craved. The ancient roots of civilization, from the Mesopotamian law to the Egyptian bureaucracy and the Greek intellect, were all quietly integrated and preserved under the quiet stone of the Roman state. The distant night of the pre-imperial world gave way to the steady lantern glow of a single universal empire. Chapter 17, Early Journeys. The rise of Christianity and the spiritual shift. The long stability of the Pax Romana, which successfully absorbed the ancient civilizations under its administrative legacy, provided the quiet, secure environment for the next profound phase of early journeys, the emergence and widespread integration of Christianity. This shift was a fundamental turning point, transforming the spiritual and ethical core of the entire ancient world. Christianity originating in the Levant, a region profoundly influenced by the Mesopotamian legal legacy and the Hellenistic philosophical synthesis, began its quiet journey not as a political force, but as a pervasive spiritual movement. Its spread utilized the very infrastructure Rome had perfected: the unified language Koine Greek, the vast network of paved Roman roads, and the immense internal peace of the empire. The gentle footsteps of its early followers traveled along the secure trade routes, carrying a message that offered immense solace and moral clarity. The core of this spiritual formation was the introduction of a universal ethical framework that transcended national and ethnic boundaries. Unlike the localized patron gods of the Greek polis or the official state-centric Roman cults. Christianity offered a personal relationship with a single, universal deity and a promise of eternal life, acting as a powerful softening filter for the stress and suffering inherent in the ancient world. The early Roman response to this movement was mixed, often resulting in distant echoes of political conflict and sporadic persecution, which we view as isolated temporary institutional resistance. However, the faith's perseverance only strengthened its legacy, leading to its ultimate evolution within the imperial structure. The decisive turning point occurred under Emperor Constantine the Great in the 4th century CE. Constantine's softened historical shift, the granting of official legal tolerance to Christianity Edict of Milan 313 CE, did not instantly make it the state religion, but it formally ended the major periods of resistance, allowing the Church to integrate openly with the vast administrative legacy of Rome. This integration was a massive formation for the Church itself, which quietly adopted the Roman provincial structure dioceses for its own hierarchy. Philosophically, the Christian thinkers, the Church Fathers, engaged profoundly with the Hellenistic legacy, particularly Platonism, using Greek reason and logic to articulate theological doctrine. The legacy of this spiritual shift was the creation of a new durable cultural anchor for the vast Roman domain. As the Western Empire began to face external stress and political dissolution, the Christian Church remained the single unified institution. The warm breath of its shared faith, its legal structure, and its preservation of classical learning within its monasteries ensured the continuity of ancient roots through the chaos of the subsequent centuries. The quiet night of the pre-Christian world yielded to the lantern glow of a new unified faith, ready to shape the final transformation of the ancient civilizations. Chapter 18. Turning Points. The Roman Divide and the Byzantine Anchor. The vast unified structure of the Pax Romana, which successfully absorbed and maintained the ancient civilizations, began to experience its final decisive turning points. A softened historical shift that led to the permanent division of the empire and the establishment of the Byzantine Anchor. The immense stress of managing the colossal empire, external pressures on the frontiers, internal economic inflation, and the uncertainty of succession compelled the Roman government to seek systemic change. This was a methodical, unhurried evolution toward decentralization, led by emperors Diocletian and Constantine. Diocletian, late 3rd century CE, first formalized the division, recognizing that the sheer size of the territory had exceeded the capacity of a single ruler. He implemented the tetrarchy rule of 4, administratively dividing the empire into 2 halves, east and west. This was a strategic formation designed to ensure rulers were always closer to the most vulnerable frontiers and to provide a clear line of succession, acting as a softening filter against political chaos. The definitive turning point came with Constantine the Great, 4th century CE. His decision to establish a new capital, Constantinople, New Rome, was the ultimate acknowledgement of the East's immense economic, geographic, and demographic vitality. Constantinople was built at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, strategically situated to control trade and secure the wealthy provinces of Anatolia and Egypt. This quiet relocation ensured the legacy of the Roman state would continue to flourish, anchored securely in the East. The legacy of the western half, clinging to the symbolic quiet stone of old Rome, was a long, slow dissolution. The Western Empire lacked the economic resources and the administrative cohesion of the East. As external pressures intensified, the political structure decentralized and slowly dissolved into Germanic successor kingdoms. However, the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, anchored in Constantinople, maintained the warm breath of the centralized Roman administrative and legal structure for another 1,000 years. This Byzantine anchor preserved the cultural legacy of the ancient civilizations, ensuring that the Hellenistic philosophical synthesis, the Roman law, and the Byzantine solidus gold currency flowed continuously, influencing the emerging medieval kingdoms and keeping the light of antiquity alive in the distant night. This permanent division was a crucial evolution. It preserved the organizational formation of the ancient world by sacrificing political unity. The vast universal empire became two distinct entities, ensuring that the gentle footsteps of civilization survived the turbulent political waters of the late ancient period. Chapter 19. Early Journeys. Islamic Civilizations and the Quiet Flow. Following the establishment of the Byzantine anchor and the political dissolution of the Western Empire, the ancient world entered a new phase of profound early journeys defined by the rise of Islamic civilizations 7th to 13th centuries CE. This period was marked by an immense quiet flow of knowledge and a sustained flourishing of science, art, and administration. The origin of this flow was the rapid yet controlled expansion of the caliphates across the former territories of the Sasanian Empire and the wealthy provinces of the Eastern Roman Empire. This massive geopolitical shift acted as a powerful softening filter, absorbing vast diverse populations and creating a unified political and economic zone that stretched from Spain to India. The legacy of the Islamic Golden Age was intellectual preservation and synthesis. Unlike the fragmentation in the West, Islamic scholars systematically sought out, translated, and meticulously preserved the complete philosophical and scientific archives of the Greeks, Romans, Persians, and Indians. Imagine the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, where scholars quietly translated the works of Aristotle, Ptolemy, and Euclid into Arabic. This work ensured that the warm breath of classical reason survived the political transitions of the age. This sustained intellectual effort led to profound formations in science and administration. Algebra and numerals. Islamic mathematicians codified algebra from the Arabic word al-jabr and crucially adopted and spread the Hindu-Arabic numeral system, including the concept of zero. This was a fundamental evolution, providing a vastly more efficient mathematical toolkit for science, trade, and engineering than the Roman numeral system. Astronomy. As we saw in our previous journey, Islamic astronomers built immense precise observatories and refined Ptolemy's models, creating new celestial tables that improved navigation and calendar accuracy. This commitment to methodical observation was a direct continuation of the Mesopotamian and Hellenistic scientific legacy. The early journeys of commerce flourished due to the immense security and uniformity provided by the caliphates. Trade routes, including the Silk Road and the Indian Ocean maritime routes, experienced immense predictable growth. The standardization of currency, the use of credit instruments, sack or checks, and the uniform application of Sharia law, which incorporated legal principles from the Mesopotamian legacy, minimized the friction of long-distance trade. The legacy of this synthesis was the creation of a vast, shared cosmopolitan culture, a global bridge that connected the ancient roots of China and India to the legal and philosophical legacy of the Mediterranean world. The gentle footsteps of merchants, pilgrims, and scholars flowed freely across this immense territory, ensuring that knowledge was not lost but continuously amplified. The quiet night of fragmented knowledge yielded to the lantern glow of centralized scholarship, ensuring that the civilization's formation was built on the strongest intellectual foundations of the past. Chapter 20. Legacy. The long echoes of ancient civilizations. We arrive at the final chapter of our immense long drift through the history of ancient civilizations. The political structures, the centralized empires of Rome and the Byzantine anchor, have either dissolved or transformed. This final phase focuses on the enduring legacy of the ancient world, tracing the quiet echoes that continue to shape the foundations of our modern lives. The most profound legacy is the organizational blueprint. The earliest solutions forged under stress in the river valleys became the default operating system for all subsequent human society. The Mesopotamian legacy gave us law, codified justice writing cuneiform, chester alphabet and urbanization. The city as a center of specialization. The Egyptian legacy provided the blueprint for bureaucratic centralization and monumental engineering. This organizational core was preserved and amplified by the later empires. Roman legacy, the legal and administrative structure, provinces, courts, citizenship that organized half a continent. Hellenistic legacy, the intellectual framework, philosophy, science, mathematics, that provided the methodology for inquiry. Islamic legacy, the role of the scholar-scribe in systematically translating, preserving, and advancing the ancient knowledge. The warm breath of these ideas flowed through three essential conduits, acting as softening filters against the chaos of political change. Language Greek Koine remained the language of science and theology in the East. Latin remained the language of law and administration in the West, ensuring intellectual continuity. Law, the principles of the Code of Hammurabi and Roman law, survived the collapse of their governments, forming the basis for later European and Islamic jurisprudence. Spiritual structure, the Christian Church in the West and the Caliphates in the East both adopted the administrative structure, dioceses, provincial organization, and the intellectual discipline of the ancient formation to manage their spiritual domains. The legacy of the ancient world is that civilization is not defined by its physical longevity, but by the durability of its systems. The political empires of the early journeys fell because they became too vast and too rigid. But the fundamental concepts they created are the quiet stone of the calendar, the simplicity of the alphabet, the gentle metaphor of law proved to be timeless. The entire history of the ancient world is a continuous process of transfer and transformation, where the ancient roots established on the banks of the slow river were carefully tended, preserved, and disseminated, ensuring that the gentle footsteps of the first city builders echo profoundly in the foundations of our modern world. The long, deep cycle of antiquity has concluded. In this quiet journey tonight, we drifted through the gentle echoes of ancient civilizations. We moved from the origins in the river valleys and the administrative formation of cuneiform and pyramids, through the turning points of the Bronze Age collapse and the rise of Rome, to the profound legacy of law and knowledge preserved by the Byzantine and Islamic worlds. We followed the rhythm of history from its earliest beginnings to the soft traces they leave behind in the foundations of our global society. The story of these civilizations reminds us that humanity's greatest strength is found not in its wars, but in its ability to organize, cooperate, and write things down. It teaches us that the most powerful legacies are the systems that allow us to live together in peace, which require continuous, patient care. If this peaceful journey brought you ease, you may leave a soft like, or whisper in the comments where you'd like to drift next. And now, let the night grow still. Let your breath slow. May sleep come softly and carry you into peaceful rest. Good night.